You know, before the season began, you might have had week 10 of the college football season circled on your calendar. Now, probably not so much. Ohio State and Penn State losing a lot of luster due to the season the Nittany Lions are having. Buckeyes holding up their end of the bargain, though, undefeated and on the longest active win streak in FBS. They have won 8 straight meetings against Penn State, their last loss coming back in 2016. They've won 11 straight since the start of that 2024 CFP. You see Penn State trying to get a win versus a top 5 opponent for the first time since 2016 when they took down Ohio State. We now bring in Dave Biddle, who covers Ohio State for 24/7 Sports, and Tyler Donohue, also with 24/7 and covering Penn State. Buckeyes have won 6 straight at home against Penn State. The last loss was 2011. Tyler, I'll go with you first here on this question. What are you even expecting this Saturday at noon?
I think we just want to see a team that's ready to fight, that's ready to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State, because they've been ready for that fight year after year after year, despite an 8-game losing streak. You know, they've taken the Buckeyes down to the wire several times. There's been 1-point losses. But really, this has not been the Penn State team that anyone anticipated we would see over the course of the last 7 games. A 4-game losing streak. They come into this matchup under 500 for the first time since 2020. And quite frankly, even though they're out of a bye week, it's hard to trust that they're going to come out and hit their stride right now based on what we witnessed in the first 4 Big Ten games. I think we really want to see what these coordinators have coming off the first 2, coming off of their second bye week of the season. Lots of strides to make defensively. They've given up 3 late leads. They were boat raced by UCLA. And then offensively, they're working with another quarterback, the second-string quarterback turned starter, Ethan Grunkemeyer, since Drew Aller's injury. But to me, it comes down to interim head coach Terry Smith. I think he's pushed the right buttons so far. He's a guy that this team is willing to rally around. But I just wonder if they have the ingredients for pulling off maybe an upset alert situation and pushing Ohio State into the fourth quarter with some concerns. But I don't know that they have the right recipe right now. And it's a very difficult time for them to find it against this particular Buckeye squad in Columbus, and I do wonder if it will be one of the more notable gaps that we've seen in this matchup in about a decade.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Ohio State knows they're not going to be facing the Penn State team that lost to UCLA, that lost to Northwestern. They know that Penn State looked like a much better team against Iowa, really outplayed Iowa in Iowa City, lost that game by 1. Ryan Day this week went out of his way to talk about, rightfully so, this is pretty much the same team. Like, yeah, James Franklin's not there. They lost their quarterback. They lost a linebacker. All of the other talent is still in place. We know Penn State's one of the most talented teams in the country. So Ohio State is expecting the unexpected, as they said during the press conference this week. Ethan Grunkemeyer, it's a very interesting story. He's a local kid from here in Columbus, making his second career start in his hometown against the #1 defense in the country. So it's really hard to get a gauge on this. Are we going to see the same Penn State team that showed up against Iowa? Perhaps. And this is a really good rivalry. Even though Ohio State's had the best of it in recent years, this is a really good border rivalry, one that's going to go away for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and if you're maybe looking for some sort of extra motivation or some popcorn-worthy moments for this game, have to look at Ryan Day, who said that there hasn't been much communication with his former defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, going out and saying this right here. Like any relationship, when it breaks off, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but there really hasn't been much communication. Goes on to say, he did a great job when he was here, helped us win a national championship, and kind of left it at that. It was abrupt, but we certainly respect the work that he did when he was here. So what I have to ask you here, Dave, is maybe to read between the lines a little bit for me. Do you think we get maybe some pregame fireworks, some postgame fireworks, a little something here?
I really don't think so, Zach. I kind of hope so. It'd be nice to have a little drama, but Jim Knowles is a good guy. Ryan Day's a good guy. I thought he answered that question, as honestly as he could while still being classy. And like you said, Jim Knowles helped Ohio State win a national championship. He accomplished what he was brought to Columbus to do. That being said, Ryan Day did add that, he kind of left us in a bad spot there for a while, leaving when he did. There was talks that his agent was reaching out to schools the week of the national championship game. So before Ohio State played Notre Dame, that didn't sit well with people in Columbus. But overall, Jim Knowles did a fantastic job here. Is Ryan Day going to go out of his way to try and take it to him if he can? I don't think so, because Ryan Day's going to look at the big picture. He's not going to want to keep his starters out there. And this is assuming Ohio State gets a big lead, which is a big assumption. I don't think he's going to keep his starters out there just to try and prove a point to Jim Knowles and then risk injury. But yeah, it was very interesting to hear Ryan Day really for the first time talk about Jim Knowles' departure and Ryan Day's true feelings about it to an extent.
Yeah, I think when you look at what Ryan Day said about breaking up a relationship and what happens after that, there's plenty of Penn State fans right now who would like a clean break from Jim Knowles. It has been a situation where Terry Smith, the interim coach, has had a very complicated defense, and that was through 7 games of the season. That's a tough pill to swallow when a lot of people viewed this defensive unit, despite the loss of Star Abdul Carter and some other pieces, as one that was ready to compete for a Big Ten championship, one that was ready for a deep playoff push. And thus far, the defense has let them down in several key moments. They had a 5-point lead against Iowa in the final 5 minutes. They lost that game. They had a 5-point lead in the final 5 minutes against Northwestern. They lost that game. They had an overtime lead against Oregon before this losing streak took over the season. They lost that game. And then in between all that, they gave up 42 points on the road against the UCLA team that had averaged 14 points through its previous matchup. So thus far, I think a lot of people will be willing to trade this defense for what Manny Diaz did, for what Tom Allen did, for what Brent Pry did, all the guys who worked under James Franklin prior to this. Now, we have been told repeatedly from Columbus, even when this hire was made, that it takes a few years for Jim Knowles' defense to sink in. Right now, they don't have anywhere to hide. They got to come up with a solution that works for them. There's been a lot of hesitancy to trust young linebackers, and the veteran linebacker combination they're working hasn't really worked out thus far. So I think right now need to see Jim Knowles come out of the bye week, look like a guy who's willing to explore his options from a personnel standpoint, from a schematic standpoint. Otherwise, I think Ohio State and their fans will get a chance to pour things on Jim Knowles, because there's nothing based on the evidence so far in Big Ten play that tells me this defense is equipped to deal with this Ohio State attack for 4 quarters.
Dave, we put up the numbers of Ohio State's defense, and you can see this year compared to last year that basically in every category, the defense is better this year with Matt Patricia. So what has he been able to do and tap into that Jim Knowles couldn't last year?
Yeah, the talent is very good, which is crazy to say when you lose 8 draft picks off last year's defense. And they do look better. I will say, Zach, that they, especially in retrospect, we expected Texas to be a good offense this year, right? They haven't been. So you look at their schedule up to this point. Have they really played a good offense? No. So we won't truly know if this is a better defense than last year's unit. But to the naked eye, it sure looks like it. And some of the things Matt Patricia does, Knowles did a good job of mixing things up. Patricia takes it to the next level. He really does a good job of confusing quarterbacks before the snap, showing one thing, doing another. He does a good job of using his personnel. I think every football coach at every level says, we adjust the scheme to the strength of our players. Some do it more than others. Matt Patricia is the embodiment of that. He adjusts his scheme to the strength of his players. It's the same thing he did when he was with the Patriots all those years. And, Ryan Day said it. I've said the same thing. I think Matt Patricia was a grand slam home run of a hire. Ryan Day called him a grand slam home run hire earlier this week. He's just, and he's meshed well with the staff. That was some things that we heard about Jim Knowles. They never said this publicly, that maybe Larry Johnson, a former Penn State assistant coach for years, obviously, and Jim Knowles did not get along. You're not hearing any of that with Matt Patricia and the staff. And that's another thing. The common denominator from last year and this year, as Ryan Day said, is these assistant coaches. They kept the entire assistant coaching defensive staff intact. So Larry Johnson, defensive line. James Laurinaitis, linebackers, and the 2 defensive backs coach with Matt Guerrieri and Tim Walton. It's a really good defensive staff, and then it's just been taken to the next level by Matt Patricia.
So let's figure this out here, Tyler, and get down to making the pick for the game, because we see how Ohio State's only allowing their opponents to score 5.9 points per game. What are you predicting? What's the final score? Who wins?
Yeah, this has gone from a potential prove-it game for Penn State to a play-for-pride game for the Nittany Lions all of a sudden based on the last month. I think they need to take a significant step forward offensively if they're going to get where they want to go. Ethan Grunkemeier's got to be able to push the ball vertically. They're trying to do that through the pass game. Katron Allen needs to continue his success at running back. They need consistent play from the offensive line. I just think there's a lot that needs to come together in a hurry that we haven't seen in this setting against an Ohio State squad that looks as good as anyone in the country. So I've got this one coming down to 34-17, a Buckeyes victory, a 5th straight loss for Penn State. And right now you've got more people gravitating a little bit in this fan base toward the coaching search than the actual team that's playing games. And I think unless they give themselves a jolt with pushing Ohio State to the brink in the 4th quarter, you're going to see more people check out on this team. And it's pretty sad. This was supposed to be a surefire college football playoff competitor and potentially the first national champion from Happy Valley in about 40 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. The off-season line was Ohio State favored by 3.5. Now that's just been, 17 points added to that, which is, as we all know, is very rare. So it's pretty crazy. I agree with Tyler. I have a somewhat similar score. I think Ohio State, I expect a tight game early. I think Penn State's going to come out with things Ohio State's not expecting. I think we're going to have a tight game early. I think Ohio State's going to pull away. I have this one, Ohio State 35, Penn State 10. It's interesting, guys. Like, Ohio State's been very, very good in certain categories. Defense overall, passing game on offense. But rushing the ball, they have not been that good. They're the 71st rushing offense in the country. Can they get that going this week against this Jim Knowles defense for Penn State?